Susan Norrish floated above her body during a trauma she experienced as a child. A guide told her that she had agreed to this before birth and sent her back into her body, showing her visions of her future and the reason why she had incarnated into this lifetime. Watch to find out what she discovered and whether or not she's fulfilled her purpose at this point in her life. Comment and let me know if you believe that you chose your life's challenges as well. And if you've had a profound spiritual experience that you'd like to share on the podcast, check the description box for the link to apply to be a guest. I would love to start at the beginning of your spiritual journey. I know that you've had multiple experiences as a child, including an NDE, and whatever you're comfortable sharing about those experiences, I would love to hear.
Thank you. So I guess I grew up in a quite volatile family home. My parents were both survivors of labor camps in World War II and met in a refugee camp and came from very patriarchal, violent backgrounds. And so that carried into the home. And the atmosphere in the home was already quite charged spiritually because of, well, it was an older home and some of the things that were done there historically. And so I was very sensitive, as most children are, to what was going on in frequency wise, energy wise in the home. Even beyond language, I learned how to constrict myself and hold on to the tension and freeze myself. And so one of the experiences that shaped me was the one incident that kind of started it off was when I was quite little, maybe about 4. I sensed something coming into the room and my heart began to race, just so much so that, I'm not sure how many kids are aware of their heart beating, to be honest with you, but it was ringing, it was beating in my ears. It was so violently beating, and I was trying to stay completely still and freeze myself and pretend that I was sleeping. And so I was approached by a man. I believe it was someone that had continued to perpetuate this act against me for quite some time. But in that moment, when I was trying to freeze myself and pretend that I was asleep and to stop my breathing, I just slipped out of my body. And I saw myself in the ceiling with a female being. And I don't know if it was an angel, maybe an ancestor. I don't know, but I just remember feeling instantly at peace and looking down at my body and witnessing from that perspective what was happening to my body. And I didn't know that it was my body at that time. I felt very detached from it. It was just it was like I was watching a movie. And I know that the being was telling me that I would go back into my body, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to be that person. And I said, that isn't who I am. I don't really want to go back into that body. And she told me that everything would be okay. Like everything from that point on would be just getting better and better. And I can look back and say that that's true now, but there were many years when I questioned the validity of that. And it wasn't actually until I spoke with someone who has had, I think, 3 or 4 NDEs. But anyway, he was the one that said that I had a near-death experience. And I kind of put the pieces together, and I believe, just because of the stories that I've heard, countless stories of people who have had those kinds of experiences, that that's probably what happened, that I just had to escape my body, and I didn't want to go back. And this was a guide that told me it was okay to go back. And I do remember feeling like it was something that I had chosen to do, and that this being reminded me of that I had made these choices. And she also showed me some of the ways that my life would play out in the future and that it would inevitably turn around to be much more fulfilling and that I would actually come into remembrance of who I was while I was in the body. So that sense of not knowing who I am, even though when I went back into the body from that point on, was very strong. I didn't know who I was, and that searching desire was really strong in me to find out, who am I really? Who am I? That was something too that she spoke to me about, that would be something that I would, I guess, resolve or find a conclusion to sometime in my life. So that catapulted me, I think, into being very sensitive to the spiritual atmosphere around me. And although I had already been quite aware, I wasn't as fearful until after that episode. So then I was always aware of these things, entities, beings, angels, orbs, whatever around me, but it always came from the perspective of fear because I thought that I would be taken out of my body again.
If you've been feeling disconnected from spirit, disconnected from divine love, I have an offering for you. I now offer one-on-one energy work sessions. It's my very favorite work that I've ever done. I completely rebalance your energy field and give you a transfusion of divine love and healing energy for any specific area of need, and follow it up with feedback on what I find in your energy field, a little bit of spiritual coaching, and simple takeaway practices that you can take into your life and implement to help you cultivate a deep connection with divine love. I offer 30-minute sessions, 45-minute sessions, and I'm currently offering 50% off on my 4-session package. Check the link in the description to sign up.
But it always came from the perspective of fear because I thought that I would be taken out of my body again. And so I had a real fear of death after that. I know that many people, when they have, maybe perhaps more fulfilling NDEs where they connect with their true selves and they just they have a better experience or a richer experience. They never fear death. I kind of tasted the opposite end of that, and I was always very fearful. Although that was something that was quite compelling to me because I just desperately wanted to find fulfillment and I didn't know how to find that. That fear of being taken out of my body just seemed to propel me to continue to seek and to motivate me. So I, I was one of those ones that was very, I guess, hungry after spiritual fulfillment. And I would sit in church and just look at the paintings on the ceiling and wonder about God. But it was always very unfulfilling, didn't satisfy any of the questions that I had about God. And so when I chose to look a little bit deeper for myself, I was in a way rebelling against my family and my culture because they were so strongly Catholic. They couldn't understand why I wanted to go a little bit deeper. And in fact, my father would warn me often to not read the Bible because people who read the Bible go crazy. And apparently, that was some kind of religious programming from the church that he went to as a child. So he had that fear as well. But I think one of the things about the spiritual experiences, as fearful as they were, because I had several encounters that would keep me in that fight, flight, or that freeze state, really, that freeze and that overly sympathetic nervous system state where I'd be hyperventilating almost and couldn't sleep most of the time. And if I did fall asleep, it was almost like an escape out of my body where I began to put myself into the stars and I'd kind of soar in the stars to separate myself from my physical body. So the stars were very comforting to me, but the entities that would show themselves to me terrified me. And I didn't want that. So I shut down that experience visually. And, over the years, I have been more aware that those things are not going to harm me because I did get an appreciation for God in a way that was a little bit more satisfying to me than what I was getting from church. But that was really just God being God to me. And it wasn't even my own seeking after him, because over and over again, I would have these almost like invitations by, by books just being there in front of me, or door knockers that had Bible verses on them. And I knew that there was somebody calling me, and I knew that it was a communication that was beyond language or beyond human contact. And so I just continued to be open to those experiences because they were very gentle and kept me in a state of openness and trust. Whereas when I went to church, it was quite the opposite, because I found that most people didn't want to pursue God in the way that I was, or that I was recognizing God in many ways. They couldn't see that, they couldn't appreciate that, and they didn't have a grid for it. And so I was often challenged or rebuked for the ways that I thought. And I just ended up, my husband and I, we went around to so many different types of Christian denominations and spiritual gatherings that he finally just gave up. And I gave up in a different way. I didn't give up on pursuing God. However, I gave up on thinking that I would find God in a human community. And I was warned as a Christian, maybe you were too, about being a Lone Ranger Christian, and that we had to really adhere to that Bible verse about not, rejecting the fellowship of the believers, or something along those lines. And yeah, I appreciate that now, because I have a community of people around me who are like-minded, and we really do love God, and we just love people, and all of the layers of the fear that were put upon us by just generational programming, Christian programming. We've really felt the freedom of Christ in that way, where he says that I have come, to set the captive free. And it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so we actually experience that in our bodies. We experience the sensation of being free, the sensation of being constricted and fearful and clutching and worrying about being punished, that I think comes with a lot of experience in the church traditionally, is now a thing of the past. And we're learning how to, get through that in a way that's fulfilling to each person individually. That's something that I've discovered along the way, is how God is actually in each individual in a unique way. And as we discover who we are individually and uniquely, we also can give a bigger picture of what God is, who God is. And there's no need to put God into a box and define the undefinable one. So yeah, that kind of brings me up to today. I'm sure I'm leaving out a whole lot of stuff, but
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for sharing. I have lots of questions, so we'll go back and fill things in.
okay.
Yes. So going back to the beginning of your story, you mentioned that you were very sensitive to frequency as a child, even more than the words you were hearing, which I can very much relate to. And I'm curious, what was that experience like? How did you experience the frequency?
Hmm. Well, I actually remember the sensation of being in the womb. And
Really?
yeah, I remember it, feeling warm and not having any sense of time or anything like that. But there was this understanding of there's an out there, and the out there didn't feel safe. I don't remember what it was like, pre-conception, but I had this understanding that I would be going out there. into this place. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave where I was. And what I picked up on a lot was that frequency of it was a very the vibration was very dark and very full of frustration and anger. There was a lot of that sense. And like I said, I was cushioned, but I could feel it. And what we know today, how the fetus can feel the mother's emotions and things like that. I'm sure that that was a big part of what I was sensing was my mom's own emotions and sensations and things like that. But I just remember like having some sort of like receiver in my nervous system. Like I just knew and I could pick up on these different, very subtle sometimes energies. I remember when I was 6 years old, we went to Poland to visit with my father's family, and we went to visit Auschwitz. And there was, I think, a restriction on the age limit for children under 10. And so I remember being stopped, or the family being stopped. And then they asked how old I was. And then they said that I couldn't go into the gate. I couldn't go into the camp. But what was really heavy was the awareness of the vibration of the land there and the frequency of the land, the sounds, almost like a horror movie, like I could really sense the dread, the fear. Yeah, it was really palpable to me. And I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about these things. I just kind of kept them in my heart and yeah, just went on with life. But I think I've always been that one that's very aware. I think, people call empaths, very sensitive and aware of those things, but this is, I think, even beyond just emotion. It's like a transmission or something.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also experienced, and I really appreciate hearing your experience because I had a similar experience. So it's really nice to talk to somebody else. And, I'm not making this up. This is not
Right.
like in my head because I remember as a young child just being so overwhelmed by it. I couldn't even deal with the outside world. And my mom tells me that I used to cry anytime we left the house and I wouldn't stop until we got back home. Well, I remember why, because I was so overwhelmed by everything. And like the sensory input is just a lot, but also it's like there's this other source of information that you're receiving. It's
Yeah.
energetic information, and you can pick up on what's going on with people, what's happened in spaces, and so much of it. At least back in the 80s when I was born, it was just such a dense, dark energy.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I can't attribute it to any kind of a timeline. I think that's just humanity and the evolution of humanity. And I think that our sensitivity to those things is something that is just misunderstood and misapplied. But I think
Hmm.
we're beginning to unpack it. We're beginning to understand how to navigate through those things.
Yeah.
And the more that we, like you and I, we recognize that this isn't a fault and it's not something to be afraid of or to run away from, but this is actually like a gift. And that as we learn to be comfortable in interpreting what is being spoken or transmitted from a place of being in absolute peace and in love, then we can actually help recalibrate not only our own nervous system, but the nervous systems of those around us, and even I think in a much larger scale, what I would call the matrix or the grid. So I think that's one of the cool things about being, I guess, misunderstood for having those gifts,
Hmm.
is that it forced me to find my normal, not just what I thought was normal or what I was told was normal, but I had to find how to be me within all of this that really nobody had any grid for at that time. I remember having what they called back then a mini nervous breakdown when I was about 18.
Uh-huh.
And I look back now and I recognize, well, because that was a pattern in my life, I recognize it now as a panic attack. But we didn't have that understanding when I was that young, and we had different labels for it, different interpretations. And those are the things that we're learning to let go of, not just in the church culture, although that's a big component. I think just all around, we're learning how to step away from how we've interpreted things and be a little bit more open about different perspectives. So I think that's really healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may have already slightly answered this, but my next question was going to be to ask you, do you feel that the energy has lightened up and lifted on the earth as a whole throughout your life?
Well, I can only speak from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel absolutely that things are lightening
Yeah.
and that the frequency is shifting in a, it seems like a quick or a faster pace, but at the same time feels like it's slowing. And I think that is because for the majority of people, we are beginning to do things like breath work and yoga and meditation and all of those things that, our my church culture said were illegal or unbiblical or unholy or all of that. As we're opening up to those things that I believe Jesus himself walked in and learned about and engaged with, it helps to rewire our own individual nervous system. It helps to bring us out of that state of fight flight, that sense where the heavy presence of some kind of entity or pressure or social construct causes us to feel overwhelmed and overstressed and overworked like slaves. And we're beginning to appreciate going out and into nature more and taking more time to do these things that are a little softer and a little bit gentler on the nervous system so we can recalibrate. As we do that energetically, and because we're all connected, we all are one, it helps reach everybody else around us.
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to get into the breath work with you so we can talk more about that specific
Okay.
but before we get there, I want to also ask you more about your NDE. One thing that you mentioned is that you were told by your guide that you would come into a remembrance of who you are in the body, which is a
Mhm.
fascinating topic to me because when we're out of body, from my experience of it and many stories that I've heard, we know who we are. We are our full, complete spiritual selves outside the body. Why is it that we come into the body to have this experience of remembering who we are in the body?
Wow, that is a profound question because I think it depends on every individual's desire for their own evolution. I've heard people talking about God knowing God, and that's all that is, we're a mirror of who God is, and that we allow God to experience God through these bodies. It's the glory of God, as the Bible puts it. The glory is this body because the Bible talks about, the stars have a glory and the animals have a certain glory, and we're here to manifest the glory of God, as is everything else in all of creation. But we have an understanding of awareness and consciousness that I think that, animals perhaps do not. They're just simply free and innocent and don't have the concept of good and bad, right and wrong that we were given. Like the Bible said in the very beginning, let us make man or humans in our image, knowing good and evil. And that's been sort of the space where we learn to separate ourselves from God, thinking that we're separate from God and feeling that separation in the body. And so what I'm beginning to appreciate and to understand is that because God is in each human being, in everything, God is everything, but specifically for human beings, we have this awakening, I guess, happening of that, that sense of God being in us or Christ being in us or whatever it is. This idea, this feeling, this sense that we're bigger than what we've been told, we're bigger than what we believe. And I really equate a lot of what the Old Testament talks about God giving the land of your forefathers to you as a blessing, that he's referring to, or that the Bible's referring to the body, to the physical body. I believe that this is the land that he swore to give us. And so we're learning how to govern all of creation by learning how to govern over our own beings, how to not heavy-handedly, judge or condemn, but to allow to open and expand and evolve and appreciate and love and become lighter and lighter and lighter. So that awakening of our awareness of who we are, it helps us to become that light being or that crystalline being that each one of us already is. So my path is different than your path, is different from, everybody else's path on the planet. But I think ultimately, for whatever reason, we choose to experience the darkness so that we can remind the darkness that the darkness comes from light as well. Like the Bible talks about God separating the light from the darkness, but then he doesn't say anything at all about the darkness. And he says that the light is good. But the darkness is also something that was created. And when we come into this realm, it's full of darkness. We sense the darkness, we feel the darkness, and it doesn't necessarily mean evil. What it means is mystery. What it means is the unknown. And we are just learning how to engage with something that has been unfamiliar to us. So that's how God is seeing or expanding and evolving into something that we don't know about, we're not aware of. And it's not from a space of fear that we feel that we have to challenge the darkness or fight against it, but simply be open to experiencing it. Yeah, and I think all of that happens in the body in so many ways. Spirit, soul, body, causal body, etheric body, energy body, all of these things that we've learned to identify all the different layers of who we really are, because all of the experiences that we have unfold on all those levels. And so we're just learning how to make those connections and to be aware of how big we really are. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that I love how you describe darkness. That's such a powerful reframe. Like you
Mhm.
could even take that into your life, maybe even into a relationship where maybe you're having some challenges and just reframe the way that you see it. Like
Mhm.
this is a puzzle or a mystery to discover how God is in this situation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love that actually. That's kind of how God's made me in, being able to look at people or situations or circumstances now. I just stand with curiosity and just allow whatever it is to move through me. And being so aware of vibration, emotion, sensation, and how that affects my body, sometimes it can become overwhelming, but I've learned to appreciate that this is actually giving me wisdom. It's actually opening up my third eye, which, this is where, the seven spirits of God actually correlate to the seven chakras, right? And so if you start with the spirit of the Lord being your crown chakra, and then the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel being your heart chakra, and the spirit of might, your,
Solar
what do you call that?
plexus.
Solar plexus. Thank you. And then the spirit of knowledge being your sacral, and the spirit of the fear of the Lord being your root chakra. So as these energies and frequencies and sensations and emotions and experiences move through all of these different levels and all these quantum ways and things that are beyond our understanding, there is often a meeting of light and dark, right? If we just think about meridian tapping, for example, like EFT tapping, which I love and I've been doing for 30 years, the meridians themselves will light up on certain points when you're tapping on them. So it just shows that, my understanding is that it lights up like a crystal, like a light. And so it's shining. So there's always this kind of light and darkness coming together or meeting, and it sometimes feels very uncomfortable in the body. Like if we begin to name things like Adam did in the garden when God said, I need to find him another helper because, he's feeling all alone. And so God brought all these animals, and Adam was the one that was allowed to name them. We as human beings have that ability to name things or to judge things or to identify things and put meaning onto things. And so if we can resist labeling something as pain, for example, and just allow it to just be a sensation, we can actually soften our bodies a little bit so we're not guarded. We can open up a little bit to allow that sensation to move through us to, I don't know, experience us or we experience it. And it kind of alchemizes, it kind of transmutes, and I think expands us to be able to sit with even bigger energies and bigger frequencies and bigger sensations without judging them, but simply allowing them to move through us to help build us up. It reminds me of that saying that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that's a big part of what we are unlearning as a human race is to stop putting judgment on things and be open to exploring the opportunities that are available within something that we might have previously been opposed to. So, does that make sense what I'm saying?
That's so powerful. And for people who are watching, I'm sorry. I'm sure there are so many questions that we just may not get to because there's so many different things that I could ask just about that there. We could talk about that
I
for an
know I
entire.
want to go really deep with you, but I feel like there's not enough time. And so I'm wondering,
Yeah.
what do I say?
You're bringing up so many like really profound points. I did want to ask you about the seven spirits of God. I remember reading about that, I believe, in the book of Revelation, but I don't ever remember hearing the names of the spirits. Where did those names come from?
Well, I think they're in the Old Testament as well. I
Okay.
think it's in Isaiah, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know for sure. But because of my Christian upbringing, I've been like really captivated and grounded by the spirit of the Bible, if that makes sense. So by the spirit of the word, not just the
Hmm.
Bible. I appreciate other, extra biblical texts and other scriptures in other cultures as well. But because of I guess, my being raised in that way, it really feels grounding to me when I can find something in the Bible that correlates with something that I'm feeling energetically or, or even afraid of. I was raised to not want to pursue or I was taught not to pursue things that were outside of a certain, box. And and I just felt like, what is it about that is calling me? I couldn't understand. Like I felt that sense of drawing to it, and I would always feel bad or guilty about myself because I was so curious. But as I began to just trust God, because, the Bible says that the Holy Spirit leads us into all truth. So I said, well, if you're going to lead me into all truth, I'm just going to trust you. I'm not going to believe what anybody else says anymore. I'm going to believe what you say, and you will lead me into truth. And so God just opened up so many different things and brought them back to scripture for my own ego's peace of mind so that I could not feel too overwhelmed or too out of my own box and my own limitations. It was very gentle with me to open up different ways of thinking and different perspectives and allow me to not feel like I was rebelling against, whomever, God specifically, or that I wouldn't be punished for looking into these things. So, yeah.
I really love the relationship that you have with the Bible. It seems that you interpret it a little more metaphorically and get so much wisdom and truth out of it when many people who deconstruct, including myself for a time, had a tendency to just throw it out. Like, and that's okay. People are there. I've been there. But
Yeah.
there's so much truth in there that you can take into your life without all of the dogma. I'm
Yeah.
just really curious because I know that you have a relationship with Jesus. How do you interpret the passages about Jesus, about his ministry and specifically his death and resurrection? How do you see those now?
Wow. Definitely from a different point of view, something that is much more embodied rather than something like a concept out there that I needed to believe. I really feel it here. Just like, Jesus said that like heaven is in our heart, heaven, this is the kingdom of heaven within us. I feel it resonating within me now. And to me, Jesus is the man Jesus, the human Jesus was really a taste of what each one of us as a human being is. But he was able to embody the masculine and the feminine of the divine, of the truth, in a way that I don't think any other human being was able to. And I think many got close, but I think he was able to face death, which is what we do all the time. We face these fears, we face these deaths all the time. But he was able to face the limitation of death to such a degree that whether, my belief is that he did get raised from the dead, that he was resurrected. And I don't understand the fullness of that yet, but that's just how I appreciate him being so unique in his service to the world. But I feel like he opened up something in, the cosmological realm, the spiritual realm, for all humans to be able to face the fears that have been imposed upon us, the limitations that have been imposed upon us, and to overcome them in such a way that we are completely free in our limited worldview. So becoming enlightened, for example, or becoming Christed, becoming more awakened, becoming self-mastered or self-realized, all of these things that we talk about now or more often, I think that Jesus, the human, did in the most horrific context. And I don't think that any one of us has to do that ever again. I don't think anyone has to be persecuted in that way ever again. And I think that's the beauty of the breath, because just getting to the breath work briefly, but this is one of the things that God showed me was, the Bible says that the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead now gives life to our mortal body. And ruach, which is spirit, which is breath, it's the same word, not just in Hebrew, but in many cultures. Breath and spirit are synonymous. It's the same thing. So that when the spirit raised him from the dead, he, when after his resurrection, breathed onto the disciples to receive the Holy Spirit. And I think that's just an indication of, he opened up something in this realm, this earthly realm that wasn't available to human beings prior to that. And he opened up or made a tear into the fabric of our understanding so that we can rise from this space of being stuck in these lower level chakra dimensions and rise up and meet God in the body. And we wouldn't have to be limited by coming back to our understanding of who we are by escaping the body, but that it could actually be fulfilled in the body. That to me is what the resurrection represents, is that, the thought that we have that somehow death is chasing us and the limitations of time, that we can actually let go of how we've understood those concepts too. And we can actually begin to learn how to be immortal beings, staying in the body longer, healing the body ourselves, with the wisdom that is already in there. So again, going back to that, the verses in the Old Testament about the land being given to us, this is the land here. And our forefathers, our ancestors, epigenetically, genetically, however, emotionally, whatever, those things are passed down to us. And because, there is no separation other than with our own sensory perceptions, our own limitations, those forefathers or ancestors, those who are in the cloud of witnesses, as the Bible calls it, we have access to what they experienced in their physical bodies, what they learned, and the wisdom that they had. And we can incorporate that community and the engagement of the community to enhance how we live as human beings on this planet. And so we don't have to be afraid of engaging with, people in the cloud, people who've passed over, our ancestors, angels, whatever. All of this is accessible to us. And I think that the man Jesus had an appreciation for that, that opened up something for everybody else. So I look at it very differently.
So beautifully said. I would love to get a little bit more into the breath work now. I would really love to understand a little bit more. I know that breath and spirit are connected, like you mentioned. And how can we use breath work to heal the body, to stay in the body longer, like what you were just talking about?
Yeah. So there are so many beautiful techniques and approaches to breath work, and I welcome them all, and I've utilized so many for various reasons. But I think ultimately it is such a beautiful way to begin to awaken your own spirit, awaken your higher self, or awaken Christ in you, or the life force energy within you is in the breath. And so many of us are so stressed and constant fight, flight, hyper vigilant, like I was for many, many, many years, and not being able to sleep, not being able to rest. And even sitting still in meditation as much as I wanted to for many years, to just sit still and hear God's voice for myself. I wasn't able to do that. And then when I discovered breath work, I realized that it was the breath itself that helped me get into that meditative state, or that level of consciousness that was what many people who meditate, like expert meditators, have taken many, many years to attain. In just a short time with breath work, I was able to get myself there. And so now I'm much more able to stay present in my body. That feeling, that sensation of fight flight causes us to come out of our, frontal brain, our prefrontal cortex, and it helps us. We tune into that primal energy of, I got to get out of here. So all the, energy rushes to the limbs and away from that digestion. And that speaks so much to how we eat life or how we digest life. So if we're in that energy of needing to fight or to run away or to hide or to freeze, rather than being open and able to digest all things, then everything that we see and experience in life is not going to digest well in our energy body, in our being. And breath helps us to move us from that state of fight flight into a state of rest and digest, or stay and play, as I like to say. It's more of an engaging action rather than simply laying in your bed and falling asleep, which that's not a bad thing either. That's a good thing to do too. But the breath work, it affects physiologically every system in our body, our cardiovascular system and our nervous system and our hormonal endocrine system, the hormones, just everything, our psychology. And there are so many studies that are being done now because people are beginning to appreciate that we can actually control the breath. And when we can control the breath or partner with the breath, I like to say, when we partner with the breath, we can slow everything down, slow the body's systems down, slow that energy of fight flight. We can begin to open up and expand and relax all the muscles in our body, allow the oxygen to actually be in partnership with the carbon dioxide. Because if we're over breathing, we're pushing out carbon dioxide, and it's not a waste gas, as we've been told. It actually helps to push oxygen deeper into our organs and into our tissues. But if we're constantly over breathing and not understanding that the carbon dioxide is beneficial, then we're just keeping ourselves in that state. So when we do breath work with experienced and knowledgeable and certified instructors, then we can begin to tolerate carbon dioxide better, which allows our bodies to relax more. And it allows us to, just because the breath to me is spirit, it allows the Holy Spirit or our consciousness or our higher self to go into these storehouses within the body where certain memories or certain emotions are stuck. Because if we have experienced traumatic events in, growing up or as adults even, we don't fully shake off the tension and the stress like animals do in the wild. We store them in our body. And if we don't have a complete release of that tension, it just creates more tension. It, it, it was Wilhelm Reich, who was a student of Freud's, who talked about the seven belts of tension in the body. And again, they correlate with the seven spirits of God and the seven chakras. But we armor ourselves against life because we think that life is against us and opposed to us because of these traumatic things and not being able to get the comfort that we need. Some parents don't hold their kids and allow them to cry, Some parents will, scold their kids for feeling emotions. So that sense of completion of that energy is never there because it's stuck in the body. But the breath can unlock that for us. It can go into our psychology, into those memories, into the past. It can redeem the time, as the Bible says, and set those captives free, set those energies free, set those emotions free, those tears. And then we can step back and look at it from the perspective of, being more emotionally healthy and more mature and regard all of those experiences as beneficial, even though in the moment they might not have felt that way. Even in the moment, they might have felt like death. And so there is, again, another Bible verse about victory swallowing up death, because that death that's stuck in that traumatic event, in that emotion, in that memory, in the body is then released by that spirit or by the breath. And then we are set free from it.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I know probably many of the breathwork techniques that you work with need to be done with a qualified professional. Is there any simpler breathwork practice that people could try to give them a taste of it that would be safe for them to do at home?
Well, yeah, there are certain techniques that, I would recommend, like box breathing, for example, or sniff, sniff, poo, which is also known as the physiological sigh. But what that does, I'll demonstrate it in a minute for you, but what it does is it mimics that reset that the body does after a really good cry. So after you've had, like, just a tearful experience and you just kind of get to that point where you go, and it feels like, oh, so much weight has lifted off of you, and there's that kind of sense of relief. Sniff, sniff, poo will do just that. And that's a simple one that everybody can do. And it's simply breathing in quickly from the belly and then into the chest, and then releasing the air with a sound. So it looks like this. And that's a quick way, actually, if you're feeling kind of over anxious or over agitated or maybe a little panicky, even, you can engage that and work it in such a way that if you're feeling really overly active and the energy is really like fast, like a fight flight kind of energy, you can mimic the speed of the breath work and then slow it down. And as you slow it down, it brings you into that sense of relief. So that's a couple of things, but I think the simplest thing and the most beautiful thing, and this is where my language of breath training comes in, where awareness is really the key to foundational change. So whenever we bring our awareness to how we're breathing, to me, it's like God saying, let there be light, because I feel like our awareness is the light. And where we bring our awareness and our attention and our focus, we can also bring our love and our compassion and our curiosity. So if we bring awareness to the breath, let's just say we're, out and about running around and we realize, "Oh, I'm really breathing heavy. I'm breathing through my mouth. I'm breathing up high up in my chest. And I don't really feel that great right now. I wonder if I can slow it down, extending your exhale and then even pausing for a moment after you exhale for as long as it's comfortable for you, as long as you're not experiencing a panic for air. Doing that just a couple of times a day and being aware of how that makes your body feel, how it softens you, how it opens you up. That to me is something that anybody on the planet can do. And it's so simple. It's really just slowing down your awareness from all of the distractions around here and bringing it to the body, to the breath, and sitting with it. So that's what I hopefully am helping people do more and more often in the breath, as I have learned to do, because I know what it's like to be hyper vigilant and overactive in your thoughts and in your nervous system. And yeah, it's not a fun place to be in. So,
Susan, where can people find you if they want to learn more or if they want to work with you?
so my website is bornagainbreathwork.com. And I'm on Facebook. You can look up Born Again Breathwork or Susan Norish. And I'm also on Instagram, Born Again Breathwork. Born Again Breathwork is the type of breathwork that I do, which is a conscious connected breathwork foundation, but I also incorporate other types of modalities within the breathwork frame of reference into that, as well as EFT and energy work and intuitive kind of work or prophetic words or those kinds of things. I kind of weave it all into how I work with clients. But I do a free Christocentric breath work every Saturday morning. And the link to register is on my website for that. And it's called Born Again Breathwork on Saturdays. And I also have a community on Telegram. It's called The Secret Garden, and it's also free to join, but we meet a couple of times extra on top of the Saturday meetings to go a little bit deeper. We talk about things like you and I talked about today. We explore with courage. Jesus, he said, in this world you'll have tribulation, but take courage, for I've overcome the world. And I think that's the perspective that we need to look at it from, not from the tribulation and trial perspective, but from the overcoming perspective. And we can take courage and face these things. So we do that several times a month. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I will have your links in the description so people can check that out. And now I just have three quick questions to close out on.
Okay.
The first one is I wanted to come back to that question that you came back into the body to resolve, which is who are you? Have
Mhm.
you resolved that question at this point? And if so, how would you answer it?
Well, I feel that it is resolving in a deeper way for me, in a profoundly stable way, in a really safe in my body, embodied kind of way. And I don't think it's something that I can put words to. I just have this awareness within me that radiates really from my heart and around me. And I feel that it expands, you know, just more and more the more that I bring my attention to it. So yes, it is resolved and it continues to expand.
I love that. Second question is what is the best way for people to connect to the divine love and bliss, the joy of being while in the body?
Oh, I think there are really beautiful, so many beautiful modalities that we can do to begin to love the body because we've kind of neglected our bodies or we've been imposing a lot of action on the body, meaning, through our diet or through exercise or through just being really forceful and trying to make our bodies adapt to what we think they should be and do. So coming back into quiet and stillness is really important, and being aware of the breath, being aware of the body, and not judging, just not judging. And viewing everything from that perspective of love and appreciation and gratitude. Yeah, I think that's a good start, and being open to whatever it is that you think will bring you delight and joy and peace, and really making it a point to engage those things and to bring more of that into your life. So,
Thank you. And the final question is, if you could give one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
turn back to yourself, trust yourself, believe in yourself. And I think that when we do that, we automatically make the connection to the divine.
Thank you so much for watching. My guests' links can be found in the description box. If you have had a near-death experience, pre-birth experience, out-of-body experience, past or between life memories, or spiritual awakening story that you would like to share, find the link to apply in the description box. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership at the Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.